mute this again. And we are live. Welcome to Live Coding Happy Hour for check date September 15th, 2017. I am Dave Slusher. With me is my colleague Josh Nereus, and it's good to be back. I frankly don't remember how many of these we've done lately. It's been, for a lot of reasons, it's been a rough August, and we're actually going to show you a little bit of why August and September have been extremely busy for our group. But welcome back to the show, Josh.
Thank you. And yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a while. And I should also point out, so it's the 15th, also known as iPhone pre-order day. So if anybody is out there and is an Apple geek, you were probably up at 2 in the morning. I definitely didn't get an iPhone, but I lost the power cable for my Fitbit, and so I just had to buy an Apple Watch at 2 a.m. instead. So anyway, just throwing that out.
You guys, I swear.
Anyway,
I don't buy all these Apple things. I just buy the stock. So there you go.
That's probably better. That's probably a much better plan.
Way better than everyone else. All right. So the agenda today, we're going to do some integration with Office 365, and you're going to drive that. Before we do that, we're actually going to show a couple quick videos of CreatorCon in San Diego. Both of us were at that event, and both of us were presenting. And even before we do that, let's give our longer intros. If you want to go first, Josh.
Yeah, so as Dave mentioned, I am Josh Nereus. I'm a developer evangelist here at ServiceNow in the developer program, and developer.servicenow.com. We have to always remember to throw that out there. And that's me. Yeah, that's my really interesting intro. We've been not at this for a while, so we're a little rusty here.
And I'm Dave Slusher, also a developer evangelist with the Platform Business Unit. And we've been mostly on the road. I went to CreatorCon in India. We went to see a preview of the Kingston release. We went to CreatorCon in San Diego. And that sounds like 3 things, but that really ate up most of 6 weeks. So we're kind of getting back in the groove and getting back into the fall. And although it is like 87 degrees here. So as far as I'm concerned, it's still summer. So before we get into anything else, what are you drinking today, Josh?
So even though it's like 80 here in Chicago as well, but I have the first Oktoberfest of the season. It is that time of year. It's a Oktoberfest from Bell's in Michigan.
All right, and I'm going to try to drink this Terrapin Liquid Bliss Chocolate Peanut Butter Porter. Now, I believe it's at least a year old. Now, the porters tend to age a little better, and they don't get quite as soy saucy as some of your other, as like a lager would or something like that. But there's no guarantee. So my backup beer, if that one is just sheer undrinkable, is a Hop Hash IPA from Sweetwater.
Backup beer.
Yes, I have a backup beer, and I picked that chocolate peanut butter porter because I'm also drinking an Americano from Starbucks. So I wanted something that wouldn't be too jarring. So I've actually got 3 beverages right here in front of me. So if that's not the most developer-y thing that happens today, then I don't know what is.
Hey, we're ready to live code.
Yes, absolutely. If all I need is Mountain Dew and Cheetos, then I'd really be ready to go. So before we do anything else, let us play our quick videos.
All right, sounds good. So we're going to roll into a quick some highlights from the overall CreatorCon event in San Diego. So here we go. All right, so that was a little bit about the San Diego CreatorCon event. And in that event, we actually ran this IoT Lab, and I recently published this big, long blog post about it. We spent a ton of time preparing for that thing. Dave knows what this is like. He ran this thing, or he helped run this thing out in India. He, you're like transferring Legos in your luggage and all that?
I didn't actually do anything with the lab itself. That's how actually part of what makes my head explode is I spent so much time on this lab twice. I've never run the lab, right? I was but I did carry the Legos to India in my luggage in August. So I was basically the Lego Sherpa.
Nice.
The electronics, very easy to source in India, and the Legos very difficult to source in India, oddly enough.
I guess that is interesting. I could see that making sense. So we did run that lab again in San Diego, and leading up to that, there was again just all of this prep work. So I was actually out in San Diego the week before, helping assemble breadboards and getting all of this stuff together. And then Dave and I were building Legos the day before, and so we put together a quick video about that as well. So here is 57 seconds of a look at that lab. Well, we might have 57 seconds of a video. Let's try that again. All right, we're back. So hope you enjoyed those. Just a little bit of a look at what was there. And we had a ton of fun, though. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
And that is why the next event like this, you have an opportunity to go to, just go to. They are super fun. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's not very often you get to go and like hack on electronics, and people that actually participated in that lab got to take some of them home. And so we've got a number of people out there that have taken these things home, and they're actually trying to get them up and running and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. So that's probably the longest preamble we've had on live coding before. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Absolutely. Dear God, I hope it is.
On that note, we should jump right into what we're going to do today. So anything else before we go?
No, let's get right into it.
Okay, sounds good. So Dave mentioned we're going to be looking at the Office 365 integrations or integrating with Office 365 in some way. And part of the reason we're doing this is this question actually comes up a lot. So if you're out there in the community, you'll see quite often questions come up about how do I get event information, or how do I maybe interact with emails in different ways. A lot of people wanting to deal with SharePoint. There's just a lot of use cases for why you might want to integrate with Office. And so we decided to just go down this path and see what we can do. So in true live coding fashion, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen here today, but we just want to start trying to see if we can get into some email and calendar interactions, and I'll start to talk about specifically what some of those are here as we go. So with that, let me go ahead and share out my screen, do the usual stuff we do. Let's see if I can share the correct screen. There we go. Should be. Turn off the video. And can you see my screen, Dave?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, cool. So let me just, I guess, set the stage for what I'm hoping to try to do. So a little while back, we spent some time working on a meetup.com integration. And as probably a lot of you know, we have the developer meetup program here in the developer program. And we've got today, I think it's like 22 or 23 meetups, like 4,000 members, whatever. It's growing at a crazy rate. And one of the challenges that we're running into is, from a purely administrative standpoint, there's just a lot of stuff. There are a ton of emails coming from meetup.com at any given time. We've got meetups happening in up to 22 chapters, and we don't necessarily always know exactly when they're happening, and it just gets a little bit challenging to maintain it and make sure everything's looking good and that we're sending out emails and that sort of thing. So we've been working to try to make some of that better. And the first thing I'm looking at is finding ways of saying anytime we have meetup events, I want stuff on my calendar. I just want it to show up. I don't want an invite. I just want an entry to show up on my calendar that there's a meetup for a particular group on a particular day. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is as I was thinking about this, all this email that I get about meetups, I could forward it and we could do inbound email actions. And that's certainly one option. But another option would be to do some kind of an API call and say, look in my inbox for anything from meetup.com, and then do stuff with it. And so it's a little bit cleaner. It's a little bit, we're not relying on email forwards and all the, it's kind of an approach that tends to have some challenges that come along with it. And so that is kind of the use case. And then along the way, these are just two possible ways or two possible things we can do with Office 365. And there's a lot more, that you can possibly do there. So the first thing I did was I went and I looked for the Office 365 reference. I true to what we usually do, I tried to go and spend some time reading the docs so we don't sit here and read docs on this broadcast. And the first thing I came across was, hey, this functionality is also available in the Graph API. And essentially what they're saying is, generally speaking, you want to use Microsoft Graph and instead of the Office 365 reference. And this is something that's different than what I had experienced in the past when I was looking at these APIs. And so the first section here, I just want to spend some time looking at Graph and talking about Graph. So Microsoft has put together this Graph API is what they've called it. And really what it is it's a unified API that talks to mail, calendar, contacts, events, your SharePoint sites, your Microsoft Teams channels. It's basically like the one API to rule them all is how I'm interpreting it. And which actually makes things a lot easier than I thought they were going to be, because in the past, if you wanted to talk to mail, you had to deal with authentication for mail. And if you wanted to talk to calendar, you had to deal with authentication for calendar. And with Graph API, it's all centralized. So the first thing to look at is they have this thing called the Graph API Explorer or the Graph Explorer. And so let me just pull this up. And this is actually really, really cool. This is a little bit like API Explorer, REST API Explorer in ServiceNow, except this allows you to explore the Graph APIs. And so they've got some examples on the left here. So like getting started, I'm currently not signed in, and so this is going to be demo data. But if I click my profile, we see this goes out to graph.microsoft.com/me. And so basically me is a shortcut to say, give me stuff about myself, which is pretty helpful. Then when we actually look at the response, we can see some details like, who is it and what's their name. We can do, we can get my photo. We can say, get my mail. And so here I really honestly, when we talked about doing this session, I was thinking we were going to spend a ton of time trying to figure out how to make all of these different API calls. I didn't think we were just going to be able to say, hey, click, 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 here we go. We've got some messages. It's good to go. So this is really cool. But there are some interesting things that get a little bit more challenging. And so what I first want to do is I first want to actually start setting this up in an instance, because it's one thing to have it in the Explorer. This is a great place to get started, but obviously we need to actually get it working in an instance. So with that, first I'm going to sign in just so we can actually see what this looks like. So I'm going to pick my real account. And now I'm signed in. Now if we say get my profile, now we can say, hey, I'm a developer evangelist, and there's my phone number and stuff like that. And there's my old photo. So, but now we want to actually do the same thing on platform. So I'm just going to go and open up my developer instance.
And while you're doing that, just one tiny bit of background so Graph API is specific to like the Microsoft hosted stuff. Is that correct? That's Microsoft's API for themselves, basically.
The Graph API, yeah. So I mean, the idea of a Graph API or like GraphQL or whatever else, this is actually a term that's starting to show up in multiple APIs. So like Facebook, I think maybe made it popular when they came out with the Facebook Graph API. But in terms of Microsoft's own sort of version of that, it is specifically for hosted stuff. This isn't necessarily something, I don't know if there's any equivalent if you're running your own on-prem versions of Office.
Okay. But this is not like Graph API is not a general. Is it a general API that they would this be the same API for any other company besides Microsoft, or is it specific to O3, to Microsoft right here?
I mean, the specific endpoints are going to be specific to Microsoft and sort of like the methods, but the actual conventions are similar to others that are out there. So I think a good example of this, one of the ideas behind a Graph API. So there's this thing called GraphQL, which I don't think we can get into today. There's a lot to it. But basically, the idea is it's a different way of getting at resources. And so in a typical REST API, you have a resource, and maybe that resource is an incident, and then you have a different resource for a user. And so if you have an incident that has a user attached to it, you have to make 2 API calls if you want all the info. You say, first I get my incident, and then I get my user. Where in a more GraphQL way, you would say, I want the incident number and description, and I want the user's first name, last name, phone number, email address, and it all comes back in one body. So like the whole point of it is that you essentially go as deep into the data structure as you want with a single call. And so that's kind of one of the core tenets of this whole Graph API concept, which is not specific to Microsoft. That's something that's more general across the board. And Microsoft's Graph API just seems to be their own version of it, or their flavor of it, or something like that. So it's kind of an emerging space as far as I can tell.
Okay.
So
yeah, I didn't understand whether that was the absolute standard one or whether how. So I'm lacking some of the background on that. So I just wanted you to touch on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. Well, and I think it is a good thing to know because it's I think we're going to see more of it. And I know that GitHub just launched, I think it's GitHub's version 4 API is based on some kind of a graph technology or some kind of graph structure as well. So what we can do now, what I want to do is we've talked before about OAuth a lot, obviously, and so we're not going to focus on every last little bit of detail, but we do have to actually set something up here to make this work. And so if you're trying to set up some kind of Office 365 integration within your organization, you're going to have to do effectively what I'm doing here. And so we're just going to run through this really quickly. So we're going to go out to this registration portal, and we're going to create an app for Live Coding Happy Hour. And then we'll set it up on platform. So you'll see that we actually have an app from before as well. I can't remember what we were doing on that particular one, but we're just going to say LCSHH 9/15/2017, and we'll create this. And this is something that again is pretty standard to most integrations you're going to set up. Now what I need to do is I need to get my instance. So bear with me 1 second here while I get some credentials, because apparently I lost my session. I need to get into my developer instance, and I don't remember my developer instance URL. All right, there we go. So manage instance.
Now we'll see if it's hibernating.
Oh, no. See, we do this too. We're there with everybody else. This is just the way it works. So while that is waking up, 15730, I can use that info to finish what I'm doing over here. Was that 15730? Yeah, I think it was. So
yeah, I would like that to just go on the record for all the people that complain about how terrible it is that they have to wait a few minutes for instances to dehibernate. The thing that people don't, thing that people forget about that is that every time you wake that thing from hibernating, you're resetting that activity clock. So one of the things is people used to lose their instances because they would say log in and change your records, but not make development changes. And so that wouldn't reset the clock. But every time you wake up that instance, that resets the clock unconditionally. So we got to actually have people don't like that they have to wake their instance up, but at the same time, fewer people lose their instances because of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good distinction. So we've got our application ID now, and we'll see, is it awake? Is it awake? Oh, it's moving fast now. I think we're almost there. All right, there we go. Yep, and there it's 10 days. So that's a beautiful thing. And if we go in here, we should have an application called Developer Events. And we do. So this is what I was talking about a minute ago, where we've got all these meetups happening, and these are all the events that are coming through. And these are ultimately the things that I want to have generate calendar stuff, if we actually get this thing to work. So we're going to go to OAuth. And we'll connect to Microsoft. We're just going to call this Microsoft Graph. And I'll just call it LCHH, just to be safe. And then
because this is not a general call to Microsoft Graph. This is specifically the endpoint that you are setting up here.
Yeah, it is specific to this app, and that's actually key, because if you're going to do something similar to this, you're going to have to set this same kind of thing up. So I'm temporarily going to move this window off the screen so I can set up the client secret, and actually it's password field, so that is fine. I just wanted to make sure that I'm not exposing information that I shouldn't be.
That is actually the very worst part of the whole deal, is realizing, and sometimes it happens afterwards when we say, oh, that thing was on the screen for 5 seconds. That we might have to edit that out.
Yeah, or go and revoke an awful lot of stuff, which is always fun. And now the hardest part is finding and remembering where are the URLs for authorization and token. I found them here. So bear with me 1 second. Lots of stuff happening behind the curtain. Really all I'm doing is I'm copying and pasting some values. And so we've worked with Microsoft APIs before. This is a slightly different authorization URL than we've seen before. So we've got this login.microsoftonline thing, v2 authorize, and then we're going to get a token for it at the token URL that is similar. So v2 token, there we go. We're going to say this is an authorization code flow, and we're not going to talk about what that is. If you want to know what that is, we've got 3 or 4 videos on Live Coding Happy Hour about that specifically. And the first thing I want to do is I just want to do the most basic of API calls and get that to work. So we've got this OAuth thing, but now we need a REST message. And so I'm going to go to Studio and start setting that up. Now, this is where, we've talked about API testing in the past, and really the value of validating and testing things before you get them going, or try to get them going in the platform. And that's effectively what we're doing here. So we've got this, here's the call to this endpoint, and we can see this is the endpoint that we're going to. And so we're just going to see if we can actually replicate this. So let's go back over here.
And just from my understanding, let me state what I think is happening. You tell me if it's right or wrong. So you're going to set this up because you've defined it. You're going to set up the REST message, the call. You're going to say the authentication is OAuth. And then the first time you hit it, it's going to ask you for it's going to open the Microsoft page and ask for you to confirm, like do that OAuth confirmation handshake thing. Is that right?
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, what's going to happen is we can't actually make the API call until we get a token, and we'll start to see. So now that I've got this thing, if I select an authentication type of OAuth 2, and then I select, when we created that OAuth provider, it generated this OAuth profile. And so if we save this now, you'll see that in theory, we should get a message. Yeah, so access or refresh token not available. We have to actually click get OAuth token or get auth token to.
Okay, so it's not on first use. This is the thing that's going to ask for this is going to open the window that.
Yeah, so if I click this, in theory, we're going to get Microsoft. And there we go. It says it's a bad request because we haven't specified any scopes, so we have to go and set up our scopes really quickly, and that's expected. That is fine. So let's go back here and let's do our scope configuration. The scopes that we want. This is where the API Explorer here is really helpful again, because we can look at the scopes. So if I click modify permissions, we can see there's stuff like calendars.readWrite. There's let's just start with that. Let's start with calendars.readWrite and calendars.readWrite.shared. I think are the two that we want. So let's see. Let's go back here. Calendars. And that's going to be calendars.read write. And just a reminder, the thing on the left is just a friendly value. Now I'm forgetting. Yeah, it's plural. That's what's wrong there. So read write.shared. So you'll probably need both of these depending on your use case. So we've defined those, and now that we've defined them, we have to add them to our entity profile. So we'll go into our entity profile and do that.
I have no idea why that would be a password type thing when it shows it as soon as you choose something.
I don't know. So now if we click get auth token, it should send some stuff. Yeah, so there we go. Now we actually don't get an error, which is good. And if we click on me, it's going to ask me, you're signed in, and it says it will have full access to your calendars, and it has read and write access to your shared calendars. And that is what I want. I actually want to give it that access. It says that my organization is ServiceNow, and it was published by ServiceNow, so cool. All looks good. So we'll get a token. And if we get a token successfully, it looks like we did. Yeah, so it's going to expire soon, but that's okay. Now we can actually try to get stuff. So we're going to modify the default get here, and we're just going to say, what was it called over here? My profile. So we'll just call it get my profile. There we go. And v1.0/me. So we'll save that, and we'll test it. And if it worked, forbidden username password combo, insufficient privileges. Oh, you know why? I know exactly why. And what scopes did we not ask for?
Reading my profile.
Yeah, so we asked for scopes about calendars, but we didn't ask for scopes about myself. So I think we need user.readbasic.all probably. Yeah, let me add user.readbasic.all and see if that does it. Because I don't really want to give it write access to my user. I don't feel terribly good about that. So let's go back here. And depending on your use case and what you're doing with Office, I mean, this is probably going to be the most challenging part of the whole thing, because as you'll see as we start making the API calls, they're not difficult. They're actually pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. So now that we do this, though, we have to reauthorize this thing. So if I look for token, I can get rid of. I can actually go and manage my tokens, and I can delete this. And
if you didn't delete it, and you tried to do that, you would probably get a 403 again, right?
I would definitely get, yeah, it wouldn't work because we haven't granted the access yet. And then the challenge would be,
you would already have a token. Yeah, you would already have a token, so it wouldn't ask you for another new token. So
exactly, exactly. Yep, and there we go. So now it has read basic profiles. So hopefully that will do it. So I'll accept that. And I will do another test. Still doesn't like it.
But let's go back. That's a different error message. Right?
Insufficient privileges
to complete the operation, which is before you got bad combo, right?
Yeah, I did. So I think we probably just need more scopes, is what I'm guessing.
Do you want to just go ahead and add every scope that you've already got selected in there?
That's probably not a bad idea. So that will just remove any question about what's going on. And so if I look at permissions here, we've got context.readWrite. We've got, I don't think we're going to need mail. Might need OpenID, actually. Let me do this. I'm going to just drag this window over so I can look at it, and we're just going to add a whole bunch of scopes. And we'll deal with specifically what, maybe we can investigate at some point what the specifics were, but I don't really care too much right now. So
yeah, and this is the sort of thing, I think this might be kind of the place where, I know this is of the things I find intimidating of dealing with OAuth, we're now kind of firmly in that, is that you're a pretty seasoned hand at this. So you didn't panic the first time you saw one of these errors. You kind of knew what was happening. Yet, if I saw it, I would probably be more of a hand thrown up in the air posture than you.
That's fair enough. I think the biggest thing is to know to know that if you start getting these errors, you probably are going to have a scope issue. You probably haven't asked for some permission that you need, and usually it's a good place to go and maybe start looking at scopes.
And this scope, so one thing I don't know about scopes is it's just completely defined by there's no meaning for these things other outside of this particular app, right? There's not like a standard thing, a standard precision, a standard should call it namespace or anything, right? Anybody can make any arbitrary string with a long description, and that's what you're asking for. Is that right?
So I mean, the scopes are, if I'm understanding correctly, basically the scopes are they're defined by the API. Mm-hmm. So they're almost like roles. And
but if I went to a different application, like calendars.readWrite,
yeah,
is not a standard for, like, another thing that has a counter may just call it something different.
Oh, this yeah, absolutely.
Any arbitrary text.
Yeah. That's actually good. Yeah, that's a good point. Is these are very specific to the API. So these are Microsoft's stuff. This is what Microsoft has decided to call these, and other APIs are not going to have the same scopes. So it is very, very important to spend time in the docs and figure out or read through the docs and say, well, when I want to do this thing, what are the scopes that I need access to in order to actually do that? And I think
And just for my edification, like, you've got user read defined previously, and you've got user read write. Would you really, strictly speaking, need user read if you've got user read write, or would that be encapsulated in that?
I would think it would be encapsulated in that, but that also is going to be a specific implementation detail on Microsoft. So I don't know. I'm not sure how they treat that. And so that might be a thing where can try it with just the one and then get rid of it. It would make logical sense that you would only need the one, but I don't know.
Okay. To be perfectly honest. And Surrendra in the chat is saying the user read enables sign in and read user profile.
We shall see. We've got a lot of scopes here now we're going to access or grant access to. And so we've got that. We'll go into here. And we've got a token. We'll try that. Forbidden username password combo.
Oh, wait a second.
So that's...
No, actually, it looks a little different in the response versus the...
Let me go and look at the test. There's a related list of tests. So let's take a look at that. Yeah. There we go. Test runs. There's the middle one. Oh. Maybe we were just looking at different parts of the error message before.
Yeah, I think we were.
Yeah, that must be it. So that's pretty interesting. Well, let's do this. Not to get too caught up on this one. We don't really even care about that. I just want to try something. Let's see. We asked for calendar, if I remember correctly. So let's just see if we can do all events in my calendar. So we'll create another resource. This is one of the beautiful things about the new way REST messages work is you can have multiple gets, and that way you can group all this stuff in one place. It's much, much easier. The other thing we can try is we can try not inheriting that thing from the parent. We can actually try getting a token specifically for this message, but we'll come to that in a minute if this doesn't work. Because we know it's happening. We know it's working in Graph. So that one did work. So I'm thinking yeah, all sorts of good stuff in there. So I think we just didn't ask for some key scope, and there's a lot of scopes in here, and I don't know if I got every single one that I needed. So that's probably what's going on. Well, clearly that's got to be what's going on because this one's working okay.
Yeah, so user read looks like it should be, like from what Surrender posted, it looks like it should be the right one. It seems to maybe not be, or there's a typo in it. I don't know, but that's not what we're not gonna spelunk on that particular problem right now.
Yeah. The whole point with that was supposed to be the foolproof call that was going to definitely work.
That was the easy one.
And anyway, that has proven not to be the case, but that's all right. So we've gotten our token, we've gotten events, and but what I really want is I actually want to start pushing data the other way. And so this is where the Explorer comes back. And so let's go back to the Explorer. And I don't know why I have to keep signing in. I have to keep signing in here every few seconds.
Is your OAuth request invalidating your browser session, perhaps?
I mean, it shouldn't be, because they should be completely different tokens, but they should be treated as different applications entirely, actually. So yeah, it's really weird, though. It's really weird. Actually, one thing before I test out the event creation is if you go down to the bottom, there's this thing that says show more samples. And if we're not working on stuff today that you're interested in, like if there's something else or some other use case, there's a lot of stuff in here. And this is as opposed to going through like 15 different documentation sites for all of these different APIs. It's all here in one place, which is really awesome. So you can just turn these categories on and off.
So you could conceivably get files out of OneDrive, or do some Excel specific spreadsheet thing to something you've got in your O365 account.
Yeah, absolutely. API. Yep. Yeah. And you could do crazy stuff too, where I think you could say, I want to go into emails and find emails with attachments and then take the attachments and put them in OneDrive. Or, there's just a lot of stuff that you can do with it, which is pretty cool. So, so the thing we want, if we go down to Outlook Calendar, there are a couple of examples here for find a meeting time and schedule a meeting. So find a meeting time is interesting because if you recall, there was that the whole CreatorCon session review thing. We were trying to figure out how to get multiple people's calendars synced up and whatnot. And so this is actually an API call where you can find availability for multiple people. But what we want is schedule a meeting. So I'll click schedule a meeting, and we'll take a look. They actually have an example request here. And we're just going to call this LCHH 9/15/2017. And it looks like it defaults to be a really long meeting. That's okay. And I just want to see what happens when I run this. So I'm going to run the query. And it's going to spin and spin. Have I already logged out? Because I've got a sign in button over there again. I don't think the API Explorer likes me very much today. All right, let's try that again. So, schedule a meeting. And request body. And we'll call it this. And I'll run it. Okay, that time it actually worked. And in theory, if this thing did what we think it did, let's see what's going to happen here. Let me just drag that off the screen. There we go. Oh, what do you know? So I'm not going to bring up my actual calendar, but it shows that this event is starting now. So this went out there and it put it on my calendar. And the key here is that I didn't get an invite that I had to accept. It just put it there. So this
Okay.
is saying authoritatively create an event, period. Like this is a direct, this is directly controlling the calendar itself.
Which kind of makes sense, right? It's the equivalent of you going into Outlook and creating one. So you're basically the organizer of this event that you just created.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we look at the response, we can actually get some hints about other request parameters. So for example, this particular meeting, if I open it up, is showing my time is blocked. But then if we look at these parameters, you can say, where is it here? Show as busy. But we could have actually said show as free, and then it would have shown as in like an open thing. So ultimately what I want to do is I want to create events that show me as free so that it's not actually blocking my time. I just want an event every time there is a meetup. So I think this is a pretty good template for that. So I'm just going to see if I can start creating that now. So we'll do a new method, and we'll say create event. We'll say it's a post, and the endpoint is me events. By the way, I think we could make this create events on other people's pages if we had access to shared calendars and stuff like that. But I'm not going to do that. Submit it. And then I need to go back and get this payload. Here we go. So in the HTTP request, we'll put the content. Then we need to variabilize this. So we'll say this is subject. Start date time and end date time.
Do you want to parameterize the time zone?
That's probably not a bad idea. And I'm just going to say that the same variable controls them both.
Right.
Doesn't seem...
That would be very weird to have it end in a different time zone.
Yeah, I agree.
Unless it's Live Aid in 1985, that's not going to happen.
All right, so we got that. And now let's do some variable substitutions. So subject, we'll say the redirect in Studio is a little weird for these substitutions. Oh, that works. Start date time, and I'm just going to copy their example values back in there just to make this easy. Create an end date time. And create time zone. All right, there we go. So now what we need is we'll test this again.
Why don't you go into your calendar and delete that first one?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So that you can tell that it shows up. I mean, I guess you would note it would have a different subject because it would be test from variable sub, but still.
True, yeah. It's probably just a sanity thing for me at this point, too, because I'm going to have so much crap on my calendar, it's not going to be fun. Oh, that's interesting. So write requests must contain the content type. Okay, that makes sense. We haven't specified a content type. So one of the most common things that will bite you when you're doing this kind of stuff. So let's go to headers, content type, application JSON. We'll try that again. And this is a good example of, I know in the past we've done some REST API calls. There we go. So we actually get a successful response, and I'm just watching my calendar, and there it goes. It just pops up. So that's pretty cool. So just a quick comment on what we're actually doing here. This is a really good use of defined REST message like this. I know in the past we've built out messages on the fly without actually doing a REST message definition. We're basically just doing it all in code. But this kind of variable substitution makes this a lot easier to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
So
and the thing you just built is still callable by code.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I can just click.
It's more easily callable by code because you have to do less stuff because all the boilerplate's already done for you.
Yep. And if I click preview script usage, I get a script ready to go. So, and it's even populating those string parameters for me. So that is super useful. So now what I can do is I actually want to start working in the event itself. And so I think the easiest thing, the easiest way to get this up and running would be to just create a simple UI action on the meetup event table. So, and eventually this would definitely be something I would want to automate, but I'll just say generate Outlook event. And we're going to put this on the meetup event table. And we'll make this, I'm just going to make it a form link. I don't necessarily need it to be anything more than that. And we'll copy in the sample code and format it. And let's make sure this all makes sense. So we're passing in that. We're not overriding anything. I'm just going to leave that there. And then I'm not going to change the dates and times yet, but I do want to change the subject just so that we can prove that it's running in a dynamic way. And so I'm going to go to the meetup event table. And let's just open one of these events. Kickoff. So the field is name. So we'll just say current.name. And if we reload over here, we should get our button.
Your link.
Do. And I'll go ahead. Yeah, our link, exactly. And I'll see if this works. So we'll click it. And that takes a moment.
Cross-scope privileges added right there.
Oh, would you look at that? Amsterdam ServiceNow Developer Meetup.
Right on.
Sweet. So that is working. So we've got, and so I know we always talk about live coding happy hour and how likely it is to fail, but this stuff is just going smooth. Let's find a problem. Let's see here. So let's look at one of these. Can we get dates and times? No, we can't. So here's actually where we're going to run into a little bit of a wall today. Just in that I can't actually set the start and end times of these until I start importing the start and end times from meetup.com, and I haven't actually done that in this app yet. So I'm not even going to try to do that, but I think really the core use case has been confirmed, which is we're creating an event, and now all we have to do is we have to just start importing the date and time, which is trivial as setting 2 more variables once we have that data.
And I mean, there is an intermediate step where you could add those to the table, and just put some values in by hand. And then pass those values to your REST message, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that would work. That would work. The only issue and the thing we'll run into is like some of the time these events get rescheduled or moved around. And so like the ultimate goal is 100% automation all the way through. But I mean, for the purposes of this, I could create the date time fields. You know what? Let's just do that because I think that's useful. I'm going to create the date time fields and we'll see that go through. And then once we actually automatically bring in the data, everything else will be automatic. So I think that would probably bring us to a decent stopping point. So I'm just going to go to table. I don't even know why I'm not doing this in Studio. It's like old habits.
I was not going to put you on blast, but I was kind of wondering the same thing.
I don't know. It's been a long week, so definitely reverting to some old habits there. So I'll just say start.
As soon as you right click that, it's like, oh, blast from the past.
Well, and I even had to think about it. Wait, do I go to the dictionary? Oh wait, no, I go to the table. That's right. So Oh man. And then end time. And we'll save that. Yeah, it just feels a little weird, a little dirty. It's not supposed to be that way. And so now if I take this thing and I'll just say that it's right now, and then I'll say that it ends in an hour, 1500. The interesting thing that we're going to actually look at here is going to be the time zone or the time format conversion, because when we actually look at the code, let's look at that now. This is an ISO 8601 timestamp with that full format. And
you might need to import moment.js.
I actually might need to do exactly that. You know what? Let's just do that. So,
although getting it to that time format, I'm going to be honest. We did the live, we did the show on this Marchish, something like that, and it was a few weeks, maybe a month or more before I actually did the stuff with it. And when it came down to it, I couldn't remember the ins and outs of any of how we did it. I pulled up the video and scrubbed until I found where we had played with it and got the right calls.
That's funny. Yeah, that becomes a challenge. Well, I did a talk at CreativeCon San Diego about bringing stuff in like Moment and other libraries, and it had been a while since I had done it, and had to knock off the dust. If you don't do this stuff regularly, some of the time you can forget it quickly. Because, I mean, these things are whole libraries, and each library's got all of its own stuff.
As witnessed by me yesterday on Tech Now, trying to write an Angular, an Angular each, and completely forgetting the syntax for it. It's like I could not. I'm looking at the thing, completely cannot remember the syntax as I'm staring at the HTML code. I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Oh, that sucks. Oh man. So, so
while you're looking at that, let me read a question that just came in from Philip Swan. Is it possible to push calendar events into other users' calendars, or would you need to have authorized yourself individually first? Let me take a guess, and you tell me if it's right, because you know more about it. Is that it depends if you, the Microsoft user, have permission to write to that calendar.
Yep, that is exactly true. So, when you authenticate to these APIs, you have access to whatever you would have access to for real in the actual clients. So if you have access to somebody else's calendar, you'll be able to do that. There is a specific OAuth scope called shared, shared calendar, I think is what it's called. One of the ones that we created specifically deals with handling shared calendars. And so you do have to ask for the scope, and then if you have access to it, you'll be able to write to it. If you don't have access to it, you will not.
And you would probably get something like, you would probably see something like a 201 if you could do it, and something like the 403 if you couldn't.
Yeah, I think you'd get a 403 if you couldn't. And then this is an interesting case too, where there are sort of two different schools of thought, or two different directions you could go with the integration. One would be, do you have some kind of a service account that's got some kind of master? ServiceNow has access to create stuff on everyone's calendars, and that would require some kind of special elevated account that's got access to more stuff. Or do you limit it just to what each user has access to? And that's something you're gonna have to spend some time thinking about, because it's just going to depend on the nature of it. If it's you interacting with your own things, it's one thing. But if it's the system interacting sort of automatically on the behalf of a lot of users, you're probably going to have to set up some kind of a service account, I would guess. I don't know a lot about those, about sort of the administrative side of, the best practices of how you would structure that, but you're going to have more access than just you.
Just to like in a previous role, I basically did a Ruby on Rails component that actually did similar work to this, right? That was reading shared Exchange calendars. And that's exactly what we did. Is we created a different account that really actually had nothing except shared access. And then
Makes
that
sense.
thing would log in. It would read everybody's calendars, and I think it was read only on the set of people. But all that had to be defined like from a Exchange administrator level.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So this is actually good news. So what I don't, well, no, that's not good news. What I need to do,
should go the other way and put.
Yeah, I need to put a glide date time in here.
You do a glide date time and just whatever.
It'll just be now. Do I want? What do I want? Class cast exception. Native.
Do you need to be? Do you need to do global? Can that be done?
I don't think so. I mean, because we definitely know we can call moment because we just did a moment ago. So moment doesn't like what we're passing into it. I wonder, does this need to be? Let me do
it no glide date time to string. How about that?
Oh, I could do that too. Let me just see if this works. That doesn't like it. Now date time is not allowed in scope.
Yeah, it's not moment. It's the. And hello to Craig Stepp, who just said hi in the chat.
Hey, Greg. Let's see if that works. Okay, that worked.
Right. Now do that thing and do dot format at the end of it. And see if you get your Zulu, whatever you call that thing.
Oh, yeah.
Everything but the Z.
Now, and the reason for that is because we didn't actually specify. Can we do any kind of time zone in here? Or do we have to actually bring in time zone, moment time zone? Like, can I specify UTC? I mean, the other thing we could do is
it might be can you look at the docs for format right quick? It might be a format.
Let me zoom that out a little bit. There we go. How can I not seem to understand these docs right now? Like, I just want to find.
Yeah, click display.
All right, let's try that. Oh, that's looking better. So format string.
You don't want to have to build it all the way up, although I guess you could.
Dave,
it seems like this should be
time zone. Well, yeah, that's the components.
Seems like there should be a short.
Let me do this. Moment, format, UTC. Let's let Google tell us.
I'll take you right back to right.
Well, so the other possibility would be, can I get? Well, let's do this. So this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do to start. I'm going to. This is going to be wrong. There's no question about it. But I'm going to not worry about the time zone. We're going to still say it's UTC, and the date that we generate is going to be wrong, but we're going to hopefully get a dynamic date and time. And then we'll figure out how to fix it. So start is going to be current. That's going to be moment. Current.get value. Start time.
To string.
Get value.
Get value will be string by default.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it should be. And then end. It's going to be moment, current. So theoretically, this will give us some kind of value that we can plug in there. we'll see what happens. All right, so let's go back here and we'll save it. And we'll generate, let me put some other text in there so we know. Because at this point, I'm just letting these things collect on my calendar and I'm going to regret it later. All right, so we created something. The real question is, did it create something? And I feel like it's not a real good sign because I'm not getting...
Do we want to look at the outbound logging?
Yes, we do. So
that might be the very last thing we do. And it may not be... is it turned on for this app?
Yeah, so it's always on. It's just a question of how much we're going to get back. So, and it could also be that we don't have a correct format. What I need to do is I need to turn up the log level. So let's do that now. We'll try this again. So we're going to go into the REST message. And in the message, we can set the HTTP log level. Set this to everything so we can see what we're sending. And then we'll go back here and generate that again. It's thinking for a long time.
It's clearly doing something. So
yeah, but then we're getting a 400 back. So in our source, in our request, we're truncating the body so we can't. We're truncating the body so we can't see it. All right, so this is where I guess we'll just debug it. That would be better. So at this point, let's say right before we actually do this request, we'll throw a breakpoint in, and we'll see what happens when it stops. And we're officially in bonus time, so we'll get there. Whoop.
Did it not?
I've got the debugger open.
Yeah, you're not hitting your breakpoint.
I think is it dying before it actually even gets down there? Let me hit.
That is certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I just set up. I'm going to set a breakpoint much earlier here, so I set one up on line 4. Yeah, it was dying before we even got there. So let's step over. And I'm going to guess it's going to die the second it tries to. Yep, it does. So it immediately goes down here. Let's see what the error message is.
Do one. I think you got to do one more.
I don't think it's going to let me because it's going to exit.
Oh, it's going to exit. Look at EX. Can you expand to EX at this point?
I don't even see EX. Which is weird. I feel like we should see EX. Let's just do this. I'll go into that UI action and we'll put something in the exception. So that we can at least stop where we want to. We're going to break right there. And we'll resume. Try again. So now we're going to go down there. And we'll step in. And what is message? What?
Huh. Interesting.
Not even letting us see the message. That's pretty weird.
I think what you're saying. This is probably going to be the same issue that I see, where there's something about moment that defies debugging.
Yeah, you're correct. I think you are correct. So
something about moment that the debugger does not like, and I've never been able to pin that down.
So here is a really, really bad
Are we
solution to this.
Are we going to degrade to our old school?
We no, this is going to be, this is the hack of hacks. Just because we don't have much time here, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say start equals current dot get value start time dot split on the space. Actually, no, dot replace. I'm going to replace the space with a T. And then
append a Z to the end.
Yep. This is the worst possible thing ever, because this is not.
Dude, it is not the. Trust me, that isn't the worst code I've seen in production.
Fair point. Fair point.
It gets a lot worse than that.
That is very, very, very true.
It's so much further to go down.
Oh man. All right, so let's close the debugger and run this again. Can we make something happen? I don't think it actually ran. Let's go back into the events again and back into Amsterdam and run it.
In the chat, Craig says, "You haven't seen my code if you think that's the worst you can do."
So I don't think it's even getting to the call at this point.
Okay. So tell you what, let's admit defeat on this particular aspect of it.
That's okay. Yeah. Yeah, so let me do this. I'm just going to comment this out, and we can kind of recap. So let's see. Actually, I'm not even going to comment it out. Let's talk about it. So we successfully got going with the Graph API. And I think if there's one takeaway from this whole live coding session, it's, I think if people are out there and they're trying to build integrations to Outlook, you need to take a look at Graph API, because it's going to make everything better. And obviously there are some challenges that we're running into here, but that's mostly related to my code. But I mean, this is a single API where all of this stuff is, and you're going to get your one set of authentication tokens and whatnot, and you're going to use that for all your API calls. So use the Graph API, I would say, is the #1 takeaway. And then for what we're doing today, we successfully retrieved events, we successfully created events, and then what that means, and this is what I'll spend some time not on live coding doing, is actually updating that app so that we start. I'm going to create events on my calendar. I'm going to create events on Lily's calendar. That way we can keep track of what's going on with meetups. So I think we didn't get all the way, but we made some good progress.
All right, sounds good. So we got room to grow. We got room to do something, in the future, and yeah. So we got. It's one of those things where we succeeded easily in what we thought was the hardest thing, and the things we failed were getting our own profile and formatting a good date.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. It's the silly, stupid stuff that we did not make happen today. So
I can live with that.
I'm okay with that.
Which is, one of the reasons we started doing this thing is because because this is basically the job, right? You and I don't deliver that much production code. I can't say never, because there is some production code that you have generated in the recent past. But I mean, part of the job is you spend a lot of time thrashing on things you never would dream would be a problem. It can be quite amazing, right? So, yeah, go ahead.
Really can be. No, I was just going to say it. And the funny thing, too, is, I mean, just the nature of shows like this and people watching, there is definitely someone watching this that knows exactly what's wrong. And they're like, duh, this is the thing. And we just don't happen to be that person.
Yeah, the only thing we're lacking is somebody pasting the answer in chat. And so no further questions there. It sounds like I'm deposing someone. Nothing on Twitch, nothing on YouTube. All right, so with that, we're going to kind of bring this one to a close. We just to open the kimono a little bit, we often are making a very late decision about what we're doing. We might do some of this next week. We are usually deciding about 24 to 48 hours ahead of time what we're going to do. So the other thing is we are quite influenceable. So if you watch these things and you want to see more of something, let us know via any of the mechanisms you have to get to us, our Twitters or YouTube or on the ServiceNow developers Slack or however. We're out there. Google on our names, you'll find us.
Yeah, and definitely let us know. I mean, that's exactly where this topic came from because people kept bringing it up. So, and yeah, we're happy to do more. Future topics might still include. We keep talking about automating the process of actually doing live coding happy hour because we have lots of stuff we do there. So we've got lots of ideas, but obviously we want to do what people want to see.
If we could orchestrate the changing of the stream keys, I would be a very happy man. What we need to do is look at every like every possible API in our entire tool chain. Like what is automatable in every single thing we ever do. And if the whole thing could be automated via ServiceNow, that would be a beautiful thing. David Jones asked, will we ever do a project in Service Portal? We've done some. We can certainly do some more.
Yeah, we've done a bit. I mean, so to be honest, I'm not much of a UI guy. Like I understand Service Portal, but I can't make things that look very pretty. But at the same time, that's some of the time how we learn. So we'll just.
I think the very next time, like whenever I bring Travel Tracker back, I'm not going to show any of the backend stuff because I feel like we've kind of done that to death. But I may very well, if we do any Travel Tracker stuff, it will probably be trying to put the nice front end on it. Like my ultimate goal is to do a Service Portal widget that is a map, whether it's Map Anything or one of the other map widgets, that has a time scrubber that shows where people will be, like the map of where people will be at a point in time. So you can like drag it and it'll say, where's everyone going to be on October 15th? And it draws the points of where everyone's going to be at that time.
That would be cool.
So that's like one of my dream projects. But yeah, sir, I think the next Travel Tracker thing I do will be Service Portal in one form or another.
Sounds good.
Because it has been, as much as people love Service Portal, and the Tech Now we did yesterday was about Service Portal, we probably do more integration to UI stuff than the actual kind of hunger in the developer world. So we could maybe swing that pendulum back the other way. I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. We do spend a lot of time in APIs. So,
and there are some like we both work for a guy who's an API guy. So there is that. But Service Portal is the other thing about Service Portal is it's just fun, right? It's fun to develop in. So that may be what we do next week. Who knows? Or maybe we'll do more of this. We'll see. So anyway, Josh, what's your rating?
Oh, yeah. So the beer, the Oktoberfest from Bell's Brewery in Comstock, Michigan, I would say this is a solid, it's contextual because it's Oktoberfest. This is a 4.25. It's really good. Really, really good.
Liquid Bliss, I would say the platonic ideal of a Liquid Bliss is going to be like 4.5. I love that so much. It tastes like a Reese's, it's like drinking a Reese's peanut butter cup. This particular one is a 3.75, maybe a 3.5. This one that's been in my fridge at least a year, possibly somewhere between 1 and 2 years. It is not. Now that's the thing is these porters age, like I was said at the very beginning, they age a lot better than some of the other types of beer, but it still ain't perfect. So,
well, hopefully you're still with us next week for live coding. And
man, alcohol kills germs. I'm not worried about that. It's just really about the experience. So anyway, do a cool custom widget that integrates with another app. I don't via an API. I'm not sure what there's one of the sessions at CreatorCon in Orlando was about using the Spotify APIs like via Service Portal. So we could do something like that. Well, that is certainly on the table. So yes, Service Portal. Your hunger for Service Portal is comprehended, understood, and recognized.
Well, and actually on that note, something that could be interesting. I mean, we spend so much time in APIs, like in the weeds, but we rarely get to show the data. And so that could be really interesting is to, maybe we spend the time prepping the APIs and they're ready to go. And then we just start looking at it and doing stuff.
Right, showing the front end to it via a service portal widget. Yeah, that's certainly possible.
So I like it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will catch you again, I think, next week. We never promise, but if you subscribe to the YouTube channel or a Twitch channel, you will get notifications, which is.
And if you don't subscribe, hit the button.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.